represent approximately 1,000 members, which includes, as I mentioned, people who work in civilian oversight and support civilian oversight, but also current and former law enforcement, journalists, academics, and members of the community. We've been around for approximately 20 years, and you may not know, but the organization has deep roots in this city. Two of our founders, who are here with us today, Chris Reeder and Lorna Spearman from Indianapolis, founded this organization about, like I said, 20 years ago, when they recognized the growing need to support a field that has a critical role to play in strengthening the relationship between police and the communities that they serve. Our current Director of Training and Education, Cameron Mapelani, also from Indianapolis, was at one point the president of your local oversight organization. And then Lori White, the current director of the organization, in her short time in that position, has been a great supporter of the work that we do. And so for the last 20 years, this city has had a voice in shaping the national field of civilian oversight. So we're very pleased to be here with you this afternoon. In addition to what is a volunteer job, though certainly turns out to be more than a full-time job, I'm also the current Public Safety Policy Director for Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. And for me, after working in civilian oversight, both at the LA County Sheriff's Department and the Los Angeles Police Department, it's been an eye-opening experience to look at public safety from a much broader perspective and to work more closely with law enforcement, with the LAPD, with the Port Police, and the school police in the city of Los Angeles around some of these very same issues. And again, be able to work with and support the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners and the Inspector General's office. I want to make a couple of points, but really I'm actually more interested to transition over to the panel, which is going to come up right after me, because I think that'll be an interesting discussion and a chance to hear from all of you here today. But a couple of things I want to mention about police oversight and its evolution across the last probably 10 to 20 years, but even since Ferguson, really in the last 2 years, there's been kind of a monumental shift in the attention and awareness paid to the issues that we work on every day. So there are, at this point, a little over 200 different models of police oversight around the country. And no two models are exactly alike. They're all different. They're called different things. They have different powers and authorities. They're placed at different parts of their local government. And so it's been challenging over these past 20 years as the field has evolved to be able to develop some kind of consistent language, some kind of standardization of practices across all those different models. And language in civilian oversight matters because people talk about, in the wake of a controversial shooting, as Chief White mentioned, it will happen or has happened in many communities across the country. A community will call for a civilian review board, and attached to that commonly is a civilian review board with teeth. But what we know about civilian review boards is that there are some that have independent investigative authority, meaning that they are the primary investigative model for allegations of police misconduct. And then there are civilian review boards that play more of an appellate function. And a complaint can go through the internal affairs process inside the police department. A member of the public who filed that complaint is dissatisfied with the outcome of that complaint and will appeal to the review board. So very different models, but they're called the same thing. So I think generally, the oversight models fall into 3, maybe 4 categories that I think maybe can help understand what I mean when I say civilian oversight of law enforcement. One of those would be, the first would be an investigative model. And that would be a model of civilian oversight that has a role in investigating allegations of police misconduct, conducting systemic investigations into deficiencies inside a law enforcement agency, or in the case of Chicago or some other models across the country, investigating police use of force. And so, again, San Francisco, for example, the Office of Citizen Complaints was created in 1982, and that model completely replaced the internal affairs function of the San Francisco Police Department. So when a member of the public in San Francisco files a complaint against the San Francisco police officer, the only investigative entity is the OCC. They investigate all of those. They present the case to the police commission in San Francisco, which will adjudicate that complaint and has disciplinary authority, including up to termination of police officers there. There are other models that, depending on the type of complaint or where the complaint is filed, will retain original jurisdiction or have some role in overseeing that. So in New York City, you may have heard a lot after the death of Eric Garner about the Civilian Complaint Review Board. That model is an investigative model, but depending on the type of complaint that's filed, they can only investigate a certain number of categories. Anything else outside of that goes over to internal affairs in the New York Police Department. So that's the investigative model, right? We're all clear on that. Clear in mind. There's another model that's called the monitor or auditor model. And in that case, you have a model of oversight that is overseeing the investigations that are done by the police department. And if it's an audit model and a truer audit function, they're looking at samples of cases of investigations that have already happened. In some cases, it's kind of a quality control function. In other cases, they're looking for to identify patterns or trends in investigations or the conduct of officers. A monitor model or true monitor model might play more of an ongoing role in overseeing those investigations. Chief White has the Office of the Independent Monitor in Denver. Nick Mitchell, who's actually a member of our board of directors, has the ability to oversee investigations, I believe, in real time, from the initiation of investigation following an officer-involved shooting through the adjudication of that use of force. As I mentioned, there's also what we would think of as an appellate model or a review model, and that is an oversight entity that is hearing cases or issues that a member of the public or someone else can bring forward to that agency because they are dissatisfied in some way with the outcome inside the police department. And then there's a fourth model which has less of a day-to-day oversight function, but plays more of a role in providing community input or community voice into the community policing programs or the policies and strategies of their police department. And then having sort of carved out those four models, there's this fifth area, which we kind of call the hybrid model, which means really a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that seems to be where the field of oversight is going. So as all of these oversight models have developed, what ends up happening is they take a little bit of what works in Denver, a little bit of what works in Los Angeles, a little bit of what works in Seattle, and they put it into their model, and then you have Cleveland. So that makes it challenging and exciting and frustrating to see how the field is developing. And I think what's become clear as these hybrid models have been popping up around the country is you've seen this separation where you have a full-time professional police oversight staff that plays some role in overseeing law enforcement, a monitor or auditor. And then you have a community board of volunteers that's connected in some way structurally to that oversight entity, a civilian review board, a police commission, and plays a role both in overseeing the other oversight function, but also in providing that direct community voice into policing. And that seems to be what communities like, because you get the full-time, expert person who has a particular skill set who's doing that day-to-day oversight work, and you get the direct model for community input. And so that's kind of where the field is going. One of the other important points I want to make about the evolution of the field of oversight is that it is evolving beyond just to look at individual police disciplinary decisions or individual allegations of police misconduct, and is moving more broadly into examining systems inside police departments. And so some of the areas where oversight is having the greatest impact is looking more broadly at these systemic issues inside police departments. And an interesting point about that is, so as I mentioned before, I worked in the mayor's office. I worked for over 8 years at the Inspector General's office in LA. And one of the things that was, I think, important about the work that the Inspector General did was that we had a good working relationship with the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the union that represents the nearly 10,000 sworn members of the LAPD. And in fact, on Monday, the Police Protective League hosted their second annual full-day training on police oversight, facilitated by staff from the Inspector General's office. And so what was interesting was, when you think about systems inside a police department, and the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing talked about this, and it's a more common, fortunately, a more common part of the conversation around policing and police community relations is this idea of procedural justice and how the police treat members of the public matters. But it's also how police departments treat their own police officers that matter. And so when you think about systems inside police departments, a lot of the broken systems negatively impact police officers, and they are very aware of those deficiencies. And some of the biggest investigations that we did in the Inspector General's office that had some of the greatest impact on reforming the department was because the officers themselves brought forward information to the Inspector General. And so they became good sources of information, and the Protective League, because they trusted us as the neutral arbiters of information, more so than they did the department management, we were able to look into that. We were able to conduct investigations and look into these issues and positively change the way that they felt they were treated, which then translated into how they then treated the public. And so it's really this focus on broader systems, I think, that oversight across the country is having an impact. And it's looking at patrol operations, it's looking at overtime, it's looking at risk management issues. And so that's been, I think, an important shift in the field. Not that we've gotten away from looking at use of force, not that we've gotten away from looking at issues of constitutional policing or looking at allegations of misconduct and how the public feels they were treated by police. Those are at the core of what oversight has been and will continue to be going forward. But I think this other shift represents an important development in the field, and particularly in the relationship between community and the police. And then the last point I'll make is going back to what Dr. Carter said earlier, in that when a community is looking for information, give us information so we can make a decision. Our organization actually went out to Ferguson, and we had our annual conference in Kansas City, so just across the state, a few months after the Michael Brown shooting, and we were able to convince, after some work, to get the mayor, the then chief, then city manager to come to our conference to learn more about civilian oversight. Was the public, oversight plays that important role of giving the public information so that they can be aware and that they can make decisions. And that's how you hold elected leaders accountable. That's how you hold police chiefs accountable. That's how you hold individual officers accountable. And that's one of the key roles that civilian oversight plays. I mean, historically, we all know that many of the processes that have, internal police processes have been opaque, and that the community has not had a window into what's going on inside the police department. We also know that that's changing, and Indianapolis is, I think, a great example of that with the Police Data Initiative. So that beyond just the role of oversight, police departments and communities are opening up the departments and opening up their data so that people have information to be able to make decisions. But for a long time, civilian oversight has been one of the key ways that that's happened. So by looking at patterns of use of force, by looking at patterns of complaints, by looking at issues inside the police department and reporting that information to the public, oversight has given them that information that's allowed them to make these key public policy decisions that have impacted public safety throughout the community, not just in this one particular area. And so I think that that's one of the roles that, especially in communities, the Chief White talked about being able to have those conversations and not always agreeing, but at least being able to have that conversation. Well, there are some communities where the department can't necessarily have those conversations because there is no trust. Trust has completely broken down, especially in the wake of a controversial shooting or something, some other kind of incident. And so the role that oversight plays in those communities is giving them information, but it's also helping build a bridge. It's being that neutral arbiter that is not an advocate for the police, nor is it an advocate for the community. And that's one of the challenges of civilian oversight, is managing expectations and managing that message. But it can play that bridge building role where the trust has broken down to a point where you can't have those conversations, and ultimately can help facilitate that relationship building between police and the community, which is so critical to the health and well-being of the police department, the health and well-being of the community. And so I think having sort of pointed those things out, I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. I appreciate the opportunity to have civilian oversight be a part of today's National Forum on Policing and Police Community Relations, and look forward to hearing your questions.